Hey guys, the new Black Templars Codex is now hitting the shelves, and it's time to talk about 3 super strong melee combos that I found in the new detachments for our zealous Crusaders. So without further ado, let's dive right in. And the first one is going to be Sword Brethren plus a Land Raider, hopefully a Land Raider Crusader if you're doing the proper Black Templar style, plus Godhammer Assault Force Detachment. It's the one that focuses on mobility and transport. So what can be better than a big block of death that is moving towards the enemies of the mankind with a whole bunch of Crusaders inside? We'll pay at least 220 points for Land Raider, which the cheapest one is obviously the Crusader, and 260 points for the 10-man squad of Sword Brethren, and the characters are going to be extra. We need that detachment specifically to add mobility to our guys, plus they get the +1 to hit that they don't really need when they disembark, but it's nice if you're fighting against something that has -1 to hit. They don't need it that much because they are 2+ weapon skill anyway. And they also force a battle shock on the units they charge on the turn that they disembark from the transport, so you can potentially turn off some stratagems, defensive stratagems, when you're fighting against stuff when you just disembarked. For the characters, you honestly have a lot of good options, like Helbrecht, for example. You have the Marshal plus Castellan, which obviously still fits into any kind of Land Raider, though the latter is not as useful considering that the Land Raider Crusader already gives reroll ones to hit and wound against the unit that it shoots for a unit that disembarked from it, so you kind of have the rerolls already that you need. But if you're using a different type of Land Raider like a Redeemer, then it works perfectly. What I really like about this combo is that there is technically enough space in the Crusader to fit the full 10-man squad of the Sword Brethren plus the Helbrecht plus another 5-man squad of Sword Brethren for a total of 16 models. Think about it, it's absolutely ridiculous how much space you're gonna take up around the Land Raider when all that stuff disembarks. Or you can have like an Emperor's Champion plus a 4-man Sword Brethren squad, though honestly I think efficiency-wise the 5-man is a better choice. The main idea of the combo obviously is not just cramming as many Space Marines as possible into the Land Raider of Doom, it's the mobility of this combination. That mobility is aided first of all by the Land Raider itself, 12-inch move, and then you can disembark and charge. That's really good just by itself. But with the 1 CP Gauntlet of the God Emperor, your Land Raider can actually move through terrain. So you can park it in a very convenient spot where like it literally goes through a straight line through a wall, and then just move those 12 inches up. It is very convenient if you want to have that level of flexibility. Obviously infantry by themselves can do it anyways, but Land Raider cannot. So if you want to use the Land Raider's move characteristic, which essentially adds what, 15 inches to the move characteristic of the models, well, it replaces the move with the 15 inches, which is 12-inch move of the Land Raider plus the disembark, then you really want to have that flexibility in order for your Land Raider to be protected behind ruins, and then on your turn you can just go through them and be happy and charge everything that you want. But this by itself would not be enough for me to be very happy about this one. What I really like as well is the 1 CP Uncompromising Aggress, and that one allows us to disembark within 6 inches of the Land Raider instead of 3, and you can also disembark within engagement range. The latter is not as useful because you're going to be obviously losing the charge bonus, but there are some niche situations where that can be useful. However, moving the extra 3 inches makes a big difference. So instead of having like a 15-inch move, your Sword Brethren will have essentially an 18-inch move, as if they had an 18-inch move inside that Land Raider. After they fight, your squad can then move 6 inches using 1 CP Ceaseless Cause. Unfortunately, you cannot go back into the Land Raider with that normal move, unlike any other normal move. So that's kind of annoying, but I guess they don't want the Black Templars to be those cowards like Drukhari that go and hide back in their transports after the fight phase. They want them to stand there and take last cannons on the chest, which, I mean, if you're a true Crusader, maybe that's how you like to spend your Mondays. Who am I to judge the true servants of the Emperor? So yeah, it's a relatively expensive, well, it's an expensive combo. I'm not gonna say relatively because it's factually expensive, but it is an interesting one, and if you are into the Godhammer Assault Force Detachment, it's definitely something that you are you at least should consider. You also have the cool option with giving an enhancement to a character that goes into a dedicated transport, where you can use that with an impulsor, for example, and that one will be even faster than the Land Raider, but the Land Raider one is unique to this detachment, where the impulsor one is not, and that's what we're going to look at next. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40K coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. The second one is the Sword Brethren plus Execrator plus Companions of Vehemence. So I honestly don't like the Godhammer Assault Force detachment, the previous one, nearly as much as I like this one. This one, I really can't understand how the Black Templars can use this to their benefit very well, and this is a strong detachment, where the previous one is very gimmicky and reminds me a lot of the Firestorm Assault Force in the Space Marine Codex, which, I mean, it's not a bad detachment, but it also is one that is very hard to use to its full potential, and few players can. So the second combo, I think, honestly, like from usability standpoint, is more powerful, more likely to be something that you actually end up using. So this is a classic idea of having a fast and deadly unit inside a transport being launched at an enemy. In this case, we're going to be using a 5-man Sword Brethren unit, so 5 models already inside Impulsor, and the 70 points Execrator, the new character that gives them the advance and charge. So we fill up the transport up to almost the maximum. Unfortunately, you'll see why in a second, we cannot use that last spot for anything else unless you want to attach another character, but then you can only attach the Crusader Ancient to them, because that's the only character that can attach to the Execrator. So, as I already mentioned, we need the Execrator for the added mobility to be able to reach our intended target from a very long distance, so that our threat range is very big, and it creates a lot of problems for your opponent when your threat range is that long. Crusader Ancient that can join the party here, he gives them the fight on death on a 4+, which is useful and also can give extra OC to the unit, but other than that, only his Mastercrafted Power Sword and extra attacks are kind of useful. So if you have these spare points and you really like the model, I have nothing against running him in this combo as well, but he's not something that you really need. What you do need, however, is the Zealous Vanguard enhancement with this detachment, which costs 20 points, and it gives your unit a 6-inch scout move. And that's the reason why we cannot use that last spot in the Impulsor for anything other than the stuff inside that unit, because then the scout rule will not apply to the dedicated transport. It will cancel out, and the whole point of having the enhancement will be lost. However, with only 6 models, or with a 7-model squad if it's just one unit, we will get extra 6 inches of movement before the first turn begins. And obviously you can use that after you already know who is going to go first. So if you are going first, you will then be able to increase your threat range that much more. Or if you are going second, then you can use those 6 inches to hide better, knowing that you are not going to be going first. So this means that your Impulsor can move 6 inches before turn 1, then your guys can disembark 3 inches, they can move 6, they can advance with a free reroll thanks to the detachments rule, which is reroll advances and charges, and then they can charge with another free reroll. And in total, this would be, on average, so if we take the averages considering the rerolls, about 28 inches of threat range. And that is a great threat range for an average one. Considering that you can park an Impulsor somewhere like in the corner of a ruin, for example, and it will be really hard for your opponent to get a line of sight on it, and again, really hard for them to somehow stage or counter stage, because it's hard to stage against something that is so fast. It's still possible, and ruins will definitely be helpful, but they will have to jump through hoops to do that. The unit itself is quite strong despite not being that expensive. It's just 200 points, and for a 6-man, 3-wound Space Marine unit with a character, that's not a lot. I mean, we are not counting the enhancement. I guess it will be 220 points in total. And that unit has 15 attacks, the strength 5 AP2 damage 2 with lethal hits hitting on 2s, plus the Execrator's own 5 attacks at 6-1-2, and 3 attacks additional at strength 5 AP2 damage damage too. And you can activate reroll ones to hit for 1 CP using this detachments rule, and also activate reroll ones to wound if you're fighting against monster or vehicle. And very often that's what you're going to be sending this unit to fight against. And that's why I like to calculate against that, because usually for these kind of mid-strength units, that's the hardest thing to crack. They can do very well into 2 wound Space Marine targets or something of the similar caliber, but the vehicles and monsters are the hard nut to crack for them. And here are the results. About 14 wounds you're gonna do on average against a toughness 10 3+ vehicle, which is what I usually typically run the calculations against, and that is a very good result. And you're gonna do 17.8 wounds against a toughness 9 or less target. So if you're fighting against something that is not a proper tough vehicle, and by the way, this 14 wound mark, that will be against toughness 11, toughness 12, it doesn't matter because they're already wounding on 6s or 5s in this case because of the +1 to wound choice on the oath. That's with +1 to wound. If it was without it, it would be significantly less. Let's be honest, in most situations, you're going to be running the +1 to wound oath anyways. And these guys are also hard to fall back from because they have their inbuilt rule that prevents fallbacks for non-vehicles and monsters. And they can also make a 1 CP retribution move, which is sort of like the reactive move, but in a Black Templars way. So you cannot go away, you can only go closer to your opponent, which I think is hilarious and very flavorful. I like that rule. Overall, I think this is a beautiful example of how you can use this detachment, and it's a very, very effective and cost-efficient combo in my opinion. So highly recommend taking a look at this one. Last but definitely not least is a combo from the Vindication Strike Force detachment. So that's the Crusaders plus Ancients one, where we're going to be using the Crusader squad to its maximum potential. So that's for the guys out there who want to flood the board with angry chainsword wielding men with bowl haircuts. So we first need a 20-man squad of these guys that cost 310 points, so not insignificant, but well, it's definitely more than worth the cost. And the detachment gives us the conditional -1 to wound. That is conditional, meaning that only when the strength is higher than your toughness, only then you get the -1 to wound. But let's be honest, in most cases, the strength will be higher than your toughness 4. For units with the ancient keyword, which these guys will be as soon as you join an ancient to the unit. And then they can also make their zeal move, which is their typical surge move kind of mechanic, closer to the objective, closest objective, instead of closer to the enemy unit. And that's very useful. It allows you more degrees of freedom in terms of where you go. And as an opponent of something like a huge 20-man melee brick, I don't want you to be able to go where you want to go with any kinds of reactive moves. So that is a powerful ability, especially considering that you're not paying CPs for it, it's just inbuilt into the detachment. We want to have a Crusader Ancient with the squad for that keyword, obviously, and the fight on death on 4+ is also nice, and Marshal to buff the unit in general. Marshal is gonna give them critical hits on 5, so it's useful for the lethal hits on the mastercrafted power sword that the sergeant has, and the sustain hits on the chain swords will really love the critical hits on 5s. The +1 to wound from the vow, this is a lot of saves that your opponent will have to roll. No matter what their stats are, you're gonna give them a lot of dice, and that is a good thing. The main idea here is durability and being annoying to deal with, so that squad fulfills both wonderfully. We'll give Marshal the Consecrating Aura enhancement for the 5+ invulnerable save for the whole unit, which dramatically increases the survivability, especially for the 4+ save bodies, which would be put to like 6 up or no save at all, almost like with any AP pointing at them. And even for the 3+ Marines, which there are like about half of the unit is 3+, half of the unit is 4+, it's still going to be useful. And also use the 1 CP recitation of the Revered for the -1 to hit in shooting. So when you're being shot at, you can, in addition to the 5+ invulnerable save and the -1 to wound, you can also activate the -1 to hit. And that on a unit that, as soon as you shoot them, is going to make a D6 + 2-inch reactive surge move when they're shot towards the enemy that has shot them or towards the closest objective marker. And then for 2 command points, also charge in your opponent's charge phase against a unit that is within 6 of them. So imagine this, a huge blob runs and stands on an objective, then you shoot them, they roll like, 4 or 5 on the dice, they move 7 inches, and bam, they're within 6 inches of something of you in your army, and you guessed it, your opponent has 2 CP, and they spend it, and they charge that thing in your turn, moving extra inches, however many they roll on the charge. That is a very annoying thing for any army, and it actually is not easy to plan against because you don't know how much they're gonna roll. I mean, you can always just assume that they roll a 6 on the reactive move or surge move, that's 8, and then keep extra 6 inches so that you are in no way, shape, or form within 6 inches once they roll a 6. If they roll a 6 on the surge move, you can do that, but that's like a 14-inch bubble around a squad that takes a lot of space on the board, and that's really not easy to achieve. So it is not going to be easy to deal with this unit, and I think it's therefore worth the investment in points. Especially if you are into Crusaders, into running a lot of stuff, a lot of bodies on the board. I honestly don't really love the idea of Space Marine hordes. I feel like Space Marines are supposed to be very small and elite. But for Black Templars specifically, I think I have an exception just because they don't really care about the size limitations of Codex Astartes. They think the bigger, the better. Let me know what is your favorite Black Templars combo from the new Codex if you had the chance to read it yet. I am very excited to see how the Black Templars are going to perform in the coming months. It's definitely an interesting codex. If I was a Black Templars main player, I would probably be quite satisfied with it. The only detachment that I honestly am interested in, or I was hoping to get, and I mean, it's not that Black Templars-esque in nature, would be something like just a generalist kind of index-like detachment. I want that to be a norm for every codex, just so that you can play anything you like, really plug anything in and it just works. The companions of Vehemence are close to that, but just maybe I would want to have another option for that. But I'm being picky. Honestly, it's a good codex. There's interesting stuff there, so the Black Templars players should be happy about it. I wish I had something like your detachments as a Grey Knights player. I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.